Jana Aranya is the limit.
Yeah.
When the teachers are allowing everybody openly to cheat. His politics was not like Rinalda's politics.
Yes.
Like he wouldn't really lead a protest march, or even in his films, the way Rinalda talked, he wouldn't do that. When Tutul comes, she's saying it bhalo na kharab because she has this image of a brother-in-law, coming in a bicycle and talking about idealistic things. And she has come to see how much have you changed. This is the peak of the Nakshal time. And the bombs are exploding everywhere. But that is not making a ripple on the 7th floor flat. They are talking about some inane things. The only person who reacts is Tutu when she hears the bomb blast. It's so popular in the West. Every time they see Robida on the screen, the hall bursts out laughing. We just sat around, as was told, and we just had to play the game. And Manikda was operating the camera himself. At that time, we didn't realize what an iconic scene it will be. And
your swag, I mean, there are so many films where, there is one lady who kind of destroys the male ego. But what Apurna does in Aranyer Dinratri, I mean, you destroy the male ego for everyone, for the audience as well. I mean, I would include us as well. It's done and dusted.
That you brought up Aranyer Dinratri because we feel it is another fascinating film where Satyajit Ray talks about the young generation. There's this ensemble cast, each having their own unique characteristics, perhaps representing the various facets of the youth at that time. If you could talk about this quirky characterizations of those four friends who come to the village village.
You know that it was made from Sunil Babu's
Sunil Ganguly's, yes.
Sunil Ganguly's book, but he changed. Sunil Ganguly was a little upset to begin with because he made them from ticketless traveler to somebody even had a car. That class of people, Kaushik is easily the worst. He is the leader of the pack and he's very pompous and full of his own importance and very condescending. And, they don't understand that how their behavior impacts people who they think are inferior to them, and they live in their own world. And culturally also, they can't make up their mind, how much of the art tradition they want to accept and how much of global. So they can't even enjoy the forest or the sunset without the tropes of Western images like, Falana Western film mein aisa tha,
Yes.
Right.
They're actually in real time, they're talking about to shave or not to shave. So they're kind of in a limbo. They don't know what they want, really. And all characters are different. Sanjoy is a little timid, and he would like to be like Oshim, perhaps, but, and they're both very well read and otherwise all right people. And then Robida, of course, he is what he is, a gambler, and he says what he wants to say, and he's just himself. And also Shomit's character, he's a sportsman and he doesn't pretend to be brainy or he has no, but he still feels a little superior to women somehow. So these four odd characters, and they come to the forest for a little bit of vacation, and they just want to see the Santal women. They've heard, they just wear only, they wrap around cloth around themselves without blouse, and they are men and women drink together, which they find very exciting. So they just want to experience that, and they want to come there. And here they meet these two girls, Abhiridi and I, Joya and Apurna, city girls. Like Robida says, slacks and Sari.
Slacks and saris.
Slacks and sari. So, and what happens there? This meeting, the chemistry between Aparna and Oshin, how it flattens his ego. Without Aparna really trying to flatten his ego, but his own ego cannot accept a woman who thinks equally, who is not, doesn't feel dominated by him or is not impressed by him, and yet is polite. So in fact, for doing all the right things, he feels crushed because she saves him from being thrown out of because she knows the inspector and she says, Amader Bondhu. So they don't have to be humiliated and embarrassed, and they have to, so saves them that embarrassment, and then loses at the memory game.
Right.
And he knows that. And then he's not sure about the Santal twist, whether they've been seen or not. But at least they've been seen next to the well, having a bath. So at everything he feels, oh my God, they're getting the better of us. So that is too much for his ego. So it's about that. And actually Aparna is doing nothing drastic or not even being impolite. When he says that, আপনাকে ঠিক বুঝতে পারছি না, বুঝে উঠতে পারছি না, and she says, ওটা কিছু দরকার আছে কি, বোঝবার কিছু দরকার আছে? I mean, she's not bad to him at all.
Yeah.
And then he sort of wants to buy pay for the
Bangles.
So she allows him. She doesn't say, no, amake ami debo. She doesn't say that. But later, when she's writing her name and address, phone number, she writes it on that 5 rupee note and returns it to him. So, these are, again, if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, it's all right. So he gets it, and he leaves the door open for romance or further, development. But so when the 4 of them leave, 3 of them is somewhat changed, somewhat affected, except for Robida, which, it's like water off a duck's back. He's the same. Mairi, the ends on that. It is so popular in the West. Every time they see Robida on the screen, the hall bursts out laughing.
Oh.
And all those dialogues, you see, Manikda didn't allow Soumitra to change anything. Dialogue. He had to say it exactly like that, the exact pauses, everything. Robida could do what he wanted. That Monte Carlo thing was, whatever he said that, next to that well was his own improvisation. And picking up the chashma and wearing it was his own improvisation. So all that he was allowed to do, So, but because Manikda didn't want Soumitra, he wanted Soumitra to be stiff and, different. So he just didn't want him to be anything. But Robida did everything. And he was so wonderful. He was such a fantastic actor, really.
We actually wanted to ask you about that because we have heard that you were great friends with him, with Robi Ghosh. And his timing, ma'am, I mean, it's so unfortunate that beyond the Bengali audience, people not know him and his skills so much, but his timing impeccable. And Aranyer Dinratri might be one of the best examples of his comic timing and overall actually.
Actually, he was very good in Aranyer Dinratri, and he used to talk to me. He was a dear friend, and he is the one who introduced me to Film Society. He would take me and we would see all these world cinema.
Oh.
And it was, although Shubroto, Bongshida, Manikda, they were all, but they never invited me. But I went with Robida. And in one scene, I remember I had to laugh, like hysterical laugh. And I was not being able to do it. So he took me aside. And within 5 minutes, he showed me the technique of getting there. And I got it. instantly. So, every which way he's been a part of my life. And he was very friendly with Tiger. So he could fit in any circle, whether it was a corporate, suited, booted affair, or whether it was absolutely Bangali, anywhere he would just fit in automatically. And of course, he was a theatre person, a great admirer of Utpalda. So lots of stories there. So there was so much to learn. He knew a lot. So I would call him my mentor, really, in every which way. He would always give me the right advice. If I wanted something, I would ask him. So he was really, again, he went too early, I think. And then after he got married, we didn't see each other as much as we used to. But, and then he also left. So he was, and Manikda also, he's taken him in so many films.
Absolutely.
Right.
And Jana Aranya, this particular role that he does it with such efficiency. The word efficient comes into mind because, Ghodi Dakha, and he's doing it without any conscience. Like, no, there is no, eta bhalo na kharab, like Tutul always asks. He's not asking that.
Yes.
He's saying, this is what I have to do.
So
this is what
confident.
I have to do. And this is my time, 8:30, I have to just meet there. And fine, it's a job like anything else.
Right.
He makes it so matter of fact. And he doesn't waste his words, his emotions. He's not saying one extra line here or an extra line there. So he was very good in everything.
I also feel that since comedy doesn't translate so well, because you have to read subtitles to understand, the nuances of what he's saying would be lost on the international audience. And I feel so terrible that you're not getting.
That's what I'm saying. It wasn't lost on the international audience in Aranyer Dinratri. Because of his, the way he would shrug and be a little short person, and the way he would, his eyes would bulge, or he would do something with his gestures. The audience got it. So he was able to get their understanding on the comic things because of his timing and this chhatpatano bhav, and how he would react to Ashim or everybody else and get his own way, So I don't think that the language was a problem there at all.
So probably it is the brilliance of him that he could transcend the language barrier as well.
Yes, because I saw that. I've seen it in Paris. I've seen it in Washington. Every time he makes an appearance, like from the ones they like him, then they just, when they see him, they start laughing. Yeah.
Ma'am, we also wanted to talk about this memory game scene. Again, it's an amazing set piece. In that one scene with the character names everyone says for the memory game itself, it kind of gives the characteristics of the person itself. So if you could talk about that scene, the compositions or how you were told to talk about the names and all, if you could just take us through that scene.
No, that was part of the script. We didn't make up those names.
Mm-hmm.
We were told what names we had to say. We arrived there at a time because the weather there was very, very hot. So we were shooting early morning, like say 6 to 9 or something. And then again from 3 to 6. So we couldn't shoot the other times because it was impossibly hot.
Okay.
So when we arrived there, it was already 5 o'clock. And we had to finish that scene, So Shomindu was already doing Goj Goj, and, I'm sure this film will get lots of awards, but I don't know what I'm going to do. He was taking our, with that meter and
light meter,
really getting fed up. So we just sat around as was told, and we just had to play the game. And Manikda was operating the camera himself. And being a tall man, he was standing on a trolley, So the trolley was being manipulated by people, and Purnendu was doing the focus, and Manikda was operating. And the camera had to be, say, the camera was moving back with the trolley from somebody's face and taking the others. And at one point going to my face. And at one point going to Shaumitra's face. Now imagine doing that.
Yeah.
And one take okay, two takes okay. From Manikda's side, there was no mistake. Not from our side, but as a safety take, Manikda took. But the timing and I just mind boggles. How would he be able to do that? And in frame, it's not that the frame went like that and he adjusted it. It was like that, and then it was like that. It was not adjusting anything. And Purnendu, of course, nothing went out of focus. So it was like just fantastic. Their contribution. We did our bit. We didn't have to worry about them. But Manikda was worrying about all of us, not worrying, but at least looking after all of us and his camera and the weather and everything. So you can imagine the pressure that he was under and how much in control of his environment he was. And we did manage to finish the scene. And it was a wonderful location. And at that time, we didn't realize what an iconic scene it will be. And Kaberidi with her Machi Tarano and all that was just fantastic.
She was so good.
Oh, she was so good. তোমার মনে পড়ছে না তুই মনে করতে পারছিস না? And it was so good. And it was her comeback after a long sabbatical.
Yes.
She was just lovely.
In that scene, everyone, like Soumitra, his tension is growing literally. Your swag, there are so many films where, there is one lady who kind of destroys the male ego. But what Aparna does in Aranyer Dinratri, you destroy the male ego for everyone, for the audience as well. I would include us as well. It's done and dusted the way, because you do not talk and tell the problems. There's a blink of an eye. There's a casual look.
Yes.
Amazing, ma'am.
And Hari sort of saying, Ami parbo na. And that line also, Helen of Troy or Helen of Paris,
Yes.
That was also Robida.
Yes.
So that was also allowed. Allowed, matlab, Manikda applauded the addition.
Yes.
And
and then you said Kennedy, of course, Bobby. that was so awesome.
Yeah.
And there, when he comes back, Sanjay, after settling his hair a little bit, and gives the balish and all that isharate, the isharate kotha bola. So it just worked out and no retakes and no anybody getting nervous or anybody forgetting their lines. Or it was like a real game, real picnic, real game, So it was just every moment of that shooting was so much fun, because all day we spent together doing, chatting, and then we went to work. It was like a continuation of the work. Was like nobody was getting tense about even that scene, when I'm talking about my mother being burned to death, and that Manikda was a little, didn't allow us to talk too much to other people. And the tree was the character. And he sort of came and explained the scene a little bit more in detail there. And in the Chowkidar's house, he says that, you're seeing, and she's ill with so many children. And that was the first day's shooting. And Manikda always said that I like to do the most difficult scene first. Any director would shoot the last scene first. And then he didn't change. It's not that he added, he could have. We were in the same location. But he didn't. But he took the last scene first. So, imagine more I think of him, I don't know. And I regret that why didn't I ask him more questions, and why didn't I spend more time with him? And I get envious of Soumitra, who was the blue-eyed boy and who was he spent so much time with Manikda,
And also the way the memory game scene ends, you say that he wins, and then in this sharp cut, and there is this merry-go-round where both of you are sitting and smiling. Oh,
yes.
I mean, yeah. What more can we say?
Just one more observation about the memory game scene. I cannot get over it. The first time when Soumitra says the first name, and you look at him for once, it's less than a second, and then you look up, oh my God, like it feels like it's slowly you're trapping him in some sort of like this guy is going to fall over his face.
That is perhaps just your imagination. But yes, you see, this is it. We make a film, and it's one film, right? And then when it goes out there to many people who are watching it, it becomes many films, but it means different things to different people. And all of you are interpreting it in a different way, There is a collective way also thinking, but there's also something that you've noticed, like in Seemabaddho, for the longest time, I didn't notice that when Tutul walks in to the house, the curtains are billowing. I didn't notice that. And at the end, the curtains are steady. I mean, I just thought that, maybe the wind, but it was not accidental. It was Manikda wanted it like that. And I didn't realize that after the party, she leaves the door open. When the telephone, all that scene happens. And he says good night, and I say good night, and I go to my room, and I don't close the door. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
And I just noticed it recently. I said, oh my God. So
yeah.
So it's many things sometimes, when you're watching a film, you don't notice, or also like you will differ.
Right.
You see something and you will see something else. And when it's generations, like Manikda's film, 50 years later, the interpretation could be, it will add something else to it, But the shelf life of Manikda's films, I cannot, that how today's generation gets it.
I will come to the other scene, actually, which is a really very haunting scene, is when Kaveri Boshu's character suddenly opens up about her unfulfilled desires inside the home, and it's such a haunting scene. If you could really talk about that one scene with him.
Again, it's you really have to see the film. Like my talking about is not going to bring the scene alive. I can share my feelings for the scene, like it comes as you say, as a total surprise. And that stupid Sanjoy, at that moment, neither can comfort her, neither can, he just stands there like I don't know if it's allowed to be said, like a jackass, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does.
Can't do anything. Like he's so timid and so, for want of a better word, middle class, and so, again, a creature of his own upbringing, that he doesn't have the agency to do anything. And she feels humiliated and rejected. He could have saved that situation. He doesn't. And then she says that what it means to be a widow without a man. And what happens to you? Nobody looks at you. You're invisible. And you're not, as if you don't have any emotions or desires. So again, he's talking about female desires. It's like society thinks it's, men have all those feelings. Women's are all, sensory, they don't have all that. So he talks about it. He brings it to the fore. Her feeling of being deprived, her feeling of loneliness, her feeling of, and she actually liked Sanjoy because there was that little interaction. And she took a chance, a huge chance, which of course she falls flat on her face and she's rejected brutally and feels. So it's there. And, the jewelry and that the sound of it, it's the tonal quality of the scene, so beautiful, as just like the memory game as a chunk and this scene as a chunk. And Kaveri is again just wonderful. And it reminds me of Ghare Baire, that how Nikhil allows Vimala to go from Andar Mahal to Goitokhana, Baire, crosses the threshold and walks out. And when he asks her, Tomar kono intuition nahi, in that under the mosquito net. And he gives her all the independence that she wants. And then she feels a lot of things that she's never felt before, wasn't allowed to feel, didn't have the opportunity to feel. She becomes a woman and she goes through that turmoil. And when Nikhil dies, she's relegated to the background, she sort of recedes with, Bithoba and Sashi Kapoor and Sean Head, and again erased. So somehow I kind of always think of that it's such a man's world that without the man, nobody seems to see the woman, whether as a Bithoba or whether as whatever, you are a human being with a normal emotions and longings, but nobody acknowledges that.
Right.
And she somehow in that forest, so that in that environment with that the Shautals, with their system and their openness and how they merge with the nature, we urbans create all these barriers around us and do's and don'ts and manners and whatever. So all these things we imbibe, whereas they are so natural in their grace and their emotions, that open society. So maybe that brings it on, being there. So I think that, again, the locations, those skeletal trees without leaves, and he wanted that particular time. So it sort of lends a wonderful background for all that is unfolding. And people are actually, things are changing. If you could see that, everybody is sort of moving a little bit, except Robida. They're transiting from something to the other. So that is very obvious, like I feel, yeah.
And also, ma'am, I feel that Shonja cannot respond is also the satire of the whole film. Like, he belongs to that group who were supposed to, challenge the rules and become wild. But the best they can do is not shave. When it actually calls for being wild, they cannot do anything.
Or get drunk and do the South Al.
Yes.
That's the extent of their wildness. Yeah. So not really make a difference to the society. They talk about it and discuss it and debate about it, but they don't, when he's confronted with that, he doesn't have the nerve to not even offer her sympathy. Just hold her hand. I mean, he can't do anything. He's just paralyzed.
And we wanted to talk about Seemabaddho.
Yes.
We often hear that during the Calcutta trilogy, Satyajit Ray was a much angrier man, like frustrated with the politics and the social surrounding. Did you feel anything of that while working on Seemabaddho?
I wouldn't call him angry at all. That is not something I would say about him, because he was at least, like we were talking about public face and private face, but with us, in our presence, he was never angry. He was always in control. But definitely at a thinking level, his politics was not like Rinalda's politics.
Yes.
Like, he wouldn't really lead a protest march or even in his films, the way Mrinalda talked, he wouldn't do that. His was an overall point of view, from everybody's point of view, the socially, how the country is changing, our sets of our values are changing, how the unemployment is affecting us, our moral core, the Bengali-ness is going out of us, So not angry, but most certainly very preoccupied with the thought and getting slightly hopeless. Hope is receding from him. Like other films of him are so hopeful for the future. It always leaves that door to the room of hope open. Here it's sort of closing. Now he feels, what else can we do? So, Jana Aranya is the limit.
Yeah.
When the teachers are allowing everybody openly to cheat, when the person who's going to correct your paper and everything depends on your result. So there is load shedding. He doesn't have enough light. He's complaining, he doesn't have his own specs. He's borrowing somebody's specs. That fellow is out of town. So he's actually cannot even read. Somebody's whole life is in front of him. So the flaws in the system, it's nobody's fault. It's not the person he's also at Tarupore, somebody is flitting. All those oils might be dropping on those papers.
Yes.
So it's like the system is just collapsing. And including the moral values, like his own best friend now wants to be a taxi driver. Because now it all boils down to economics. Who's going to earn money? It doesn't matter how. So he himself becomes a middleman. And the kind of compromises he's doing. He's still trying. And he doesn't understand Aparna's point of view because she wants to get married. There's pressure at that level also. And the Bodhi, again another woman. Bodhi who sees it all, who understands it all, like Madhubi and Aruti. She's trying to keep the 3 generations together. One is, of course, the father who's still idealistic, believing in all those values, who's sitting in his chair and doesn't understand when the person comes from abroad and says, this is what we are doing, this is what we are doing. He's still not comprehending everything. The elder brother is doing whatever he's doing. So the Bodhi is observing everything and trying to put food on the table and somehow maintaining the balance. And poor father doesn't even know what the youngest son, whom he's so proud of, that he's an A-lister and he's always done so well, he's not getting a job. Because he's not even gets his degree the way he expected. And then the last thing, taking the sister of she doesn't have a problem, but he is absolutely distraught that what has he come down to. And only Bodhi sees that because the father is overjoyed. Because now now he can get married and starts whereas Robida doesn't have any problem. He is okay with selling this or pimping this, he doesn't even see it as an offense. So there are all these things. So the values of the society, Utpalda and everybody, together is like, where are we going? Was that the value of the father? Is that value that we all imbibed and believed in? I've grown up in that family where education was the thing. And entrepreneurship was not. It was 5 to 9 to 9. Now, you can, as a musician, which is not a bad thing. But at that time, to be a business person for a Bengali gentleman, which was like commerce was a dirty word. Right? So, to terms with that. But at this level, which is not even honest commerce.
Yeah.
You know? So he was, and then towards the end, when he became more, after his heart attack, when he was not so mobile, and so it became very verbose. Like he was just telling people that what he thought. Like, don't become a frog in the well. These nationalistic boundaries are all, they're not boundaries. Go beyond, stretch your boundaries, etc., etc. So he went like that, and it was, the camera wasn't moving as it should have been. It was more inside. There were different kind of films. So Jana Aranya was the last of that, and then before that, the other films were a little bit more meaningful. So angry is not the word. He was trying to grasp from his room there. He was looking at the world, thinking about the world, thinking about, I suppose, his parents, grandparents, his own life, seeing the world changing, reading the newspaper, and thinking, where are we going? What are we doing? Is this inevitable, this moral collapse? So I feel that he was very, very disturbed by that. So I wouldn't call it angry. So he just wanted to express that feeling through his films as best as he could. That please take notice. This is what's happening. And in Pratidwandi, that shot, like all of you talk about the interview scene, and all that is, of course, in its place. But that scene where there is a kind of a riot-like situation on the road, and these cars are stopped, and Tritiman goes and tries to hit the car, and he sees a schoolgirl with a uniform sitting at the back, and he can't hit the, then he cuts. So it gives him pause. That, is she the culprit?
Yes.
Do I have to hit her? Do I have to burn her? She has nothing to do with it. So nothing is in our control. It's sort of moving away, out of control. So shouldn't we think? So Manikda's looking at the whole picture. It is not just you versus somebody. It is the whole value system and how it is affecting us, and how we are not even aware of that. Like in his anger, he's ready to hit. But there is some humanity, something that stops him. But maybe you will lose it. The next generation or the next step would be to lose it and drag her out of the car and do something else, So where are we going? So I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. So he escapes. He goes and, he gives up his Bengaliness or whatever. He alters course. And in Seemabaddho, he's talking about this corporate ambition and the conflict between ambition and ethics. Again, I play the conscience. And when Tutul comes, she's saying eta bhalo na kharab, because she has this image of a brother-in-law, coming in a bicycle and talking about idealistic things. And she has come to see kotota drink karo, are you drinking too much, or how much have you changed? And your life is now clubs, parties, your son is in boarding school. So you've got everything, all the corners are tied up, and now your only ambition is to become a director. And your Dolon is not even aware of what is happening. She's just happy with her hair and her jewelry and her, her beautiful home. And this is the peak of the Nakshal time. And the bombs are exploding everywhere. But that is not making a ripple on the 7th floor flat. They're talking about some inane things. The only person who reacts is Tutul when she hears the bomb blast. Nobody else is even, they're like today, we have accepted everything. So how immune you become. And you just put your blinkers on and you just look at yourself and your own ambition and your own progress. And you think that is your world. And you really are not bothered about anything else. And then he hatches this plot when this calamity happens. And he wants to become, and how cigarettes are being used. That's the only thing now when I watch Manik's film, how much they're smoking. Everybody's smoking. And I want to say smoking is injurious to health. That concept hadn't come, I mean, have you seen how much they smoke?
Yes.
Everybody is lighting a cigarette.
All the time.
It's really like, my God, it's not right. But that nobody cared. Even I used to smoke those days, right? So anyway, so these, blowing rings and showing rivalry through cigarettes. And at the end, when this union leader used to hide his cigarette, and now he's openly smoking.
Yes.
Not only that, he picks up his cigarette packet and leaves. And then he's, oh my God, and then comes and returns it.
Yeah.
And then
Shift of the power structure.
And then he says that, আপনারা তো এসব করেন, আপনারা তো অভ্যস্ত. And he says, আমরা অতটা অভ্যস্ত নই, or something like that. Because, he's trying to pass the buck on. He said, I'm very clean. My hands are clean. You are used to these things. So now he's saying, no, you're one of us. And in fact, perhaps more complicit than I am. And then things go out of hand. And then, of course, it all ends happily. He becomes the director. And then how he's climbing the steps. And then it goes on to the Peter fan. And he calls for Tutul. And Tutul, of course, has already guessed because of that. In the nightclub scene, the friend comes and says that, congratulations and all is. And she understands that how can it from that kind of, how he confides in her. And from that state, how can he be so jubilant? And he hasn't breathed a word to her. So she has put two and two together. So she comes and she stands near the window, which is the curtains are still. So she has made up her mind. And then she comes slowly. And then she takes off her watch and puts it. And then Manika erases her from the scene. And the difference between that and Nayok is this, that Nayok, when I tear up the interview, that very sought after interview, Uttam asks me that keep chhire dilen or whatever he says, and then say, so I say mone rekhe debo.
Yeah.
Because I feel that we assume so much about a star and we sometimes judge them wrongly. And I have empathy for him now because I feel somewhere there is a conscience. And, he's not what I had thought he was. So I have empathy for him. And then when the film ends, he wants to go to her, but he's hemmed in with his fans and admirers. And she's free. She walks away with whoever has come to collect her. But in Seemabaddho, Tutul realizes that conscience is not there. So there is no empathy. And she doesn't need to remember anything. So time is remembering, right? So she removes her watch because there is nothing she doesn't need the time. There is no time. And there's no conscience. So she's erased. So all that shot and all that, the ghori, giving of the ghori, all that is part of the screenplay. So all that is thought out beforehand, integrated. Nothing is last minute, this edition or that edition. So can you imagine how he had completely sort of, and then Horishadan Dasgupta, that his character, that remnants of British Raj. So I think it was just...
The way you summed up the whole Calcutta trilogy, man, I mean, amazing. Because now I am actually thinking about so many other motifs, because this watch, it comes back in even Jana Aranya. there's the watch which Bodhi presents to Somnath,
exactly,
which he pawns later.
Yes, because that was again to remind himself of something, and then he doesn't need it because he gives it up. Now, pawning is like he not deliberately loses it, but he values something else more. He needs it for something else. Exactly. So thou you've pointed that out to me. So I'm just saying, sometimes when we discuss, new things come to light. Satyajit Ray has like a lot of people talk about his legacy, but not just Shyam Benegal or Adur Gopalakrishnan, but even today's directors, because it somewhere, without even knowing, they must be influenced by him at some level, because there has been so much contribution from Bongshida, Shubroto, and him. So somewhere somebody has emulated him, and then seeing that film, somebody else has emulated. So that's how it goes on. So
actually, when you talked about Shyam Benegal, and we talked to Shyam Benegal sir a few days back, and he told us about his story of watching Pather Pachali.
Yes.
So he came to Kolkata for some, I think some sports or something like that. And when he came, and he just went and watched the movie. And when he watched it once, he watched it again, all the shows on day 1 and day 2 and day 3. So for 3 continuous days, he watched all shows of Pather Pachali plus 35 more times.
Yes. So many people have done that. And Adur, whose own films are so different from Manikda's. Manikdas are, at a different level. And his films are so raw.
Yes.
And so, oh my God, it kind of leaves you scarred almost, And he's a great fan of Satyajit Ray. So, but his films speak a different. So, so he's touched many lives, really touched many lives, and many directors and filmmakers. There has been, some people have been very critical of him initially, Bombay film industry, like Manoj Kumar, Ramesh Sippy. Many people have spoken out against him, not with reverence. Nobody has really rubbished him, but they said, he's out of his time. He doesn't really understand the audience. He can never really make a hit film. I've got those quotations. India Today had a magazine, they published all these things. So they are true. But somehow he's lived on. We are celebrating his centenary, and so many things are happening around him. Lot of people may not have seen his films, but they know his name. And to them, I would say, please do see his film. And his earlier films, those, Pather Pachali and Charulata and Mahanagar and Aranyer Dinratri and Pratidwandi and films like that are really worthwhile,
And you would be amazed, ma'am. I will send you a few links. We spoke to some contemporary filmmakers. Purposefully, we wanted to hear their voice as well, like Abhishek Chaubey. We are speaking to Juhi Chaturvedi. So they are so influenced by him. Abhishek was saying that he lives by Mahanagar. He kind of watches it every month, something like that.
I loved Madhavi in Mahanagar, and just little nuanced performance. And everybody, Joya was like a fresh air. When she's all soaped up, and when she says, "Kamon laglo amar ki shukto," or whatever she had cooked. So that family living in 2.5 rooms with veranda, again, Bongshida, it gives you that feeling of living in a very tiny place, and yet without feeling really claustrophobic, because there's that janla which gives Shubroto the source of light. It's just so beautiful. It's a wonderful performance by everybody.
Yes.
And of course, it's Madhavi's film.
I think, ma'am, this is a good place where we could possibly end this discussion. And what a learning experience was it was for us. It cannot be expressed in words. You told us so many things, and I would rather say that we have a new understanding of the cinema of Ray after this discussion with you. I'm so glad this happened. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I saw all your what you've been doing, and
Right.
it is. I sincerely believe that it is of tremendous archival value, and you're doing it very well, and passionately, and you believe in what you're doing, and you. So I think it's good that I hope I'm able to help your project.